That was a hell of a thing.
Welcome to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy. We have a lot to talk about.
It's okay. Start slow. Take a breath.
You're right. We got this. The episode begins in Freetown, which we last saw in The Mandalorian Chapter 9. You remember, Mando helps Cobb Vanth and the Tuskens to kill a crate dragon. But now that Cobb Vanth doesn't have Boba Fett's armor, I was genuinely afraid for him in the entire episode. See, Cobb Vanth first debuted in the interludes of Chuck Wendig's Aftermath novels, showing what happened in the wake of Return of the Jedi. And now he's played by Timothy frickin' Oliphant.
It was justified.
It's just a good time to be a Star Wars fan, isn't it? And those novels are also the first place where we learned that the village is called Freetown. Finn Mahano on Twitter pointed out several musical callbacks in this episode, including the Marshall's theme from Chapter 9. The chapter opens with the spinning of a moisture evaporator, reminiscent of the old Western trope of a spinning windmill, being the only sound in the wilderness before a showdown. Then we meet up with the Pykes in the middle of a spice deal. In the Clone Wars and in Solo, we see that the Pykes have pretty much cornered the spice trade in the galaxy, mining it from Kessel and then distributing it all around the galaxy themselves. And their credits are inside of a canto, which is a fun Star Wars Easter egg. This is modeled after a homemade ice cream maker that a background character named Wilro Hood was carrying in The Empire Strikes Back. It's become a fun underground cosplay, and Star Wars Celebration actually features a running of the Wilros. They're driving an M68 land speeder, the same one Han uses in Solo. Now, this opening is important for a few reasons. It establishes the stakes for Freetown on Tatooine, and it's foreshadowing that the Pykes will eventually take over their beach community. It also shows that even without the armor, Cobb is a badass. But you know what Qui-Gon says.
There's always a bigger fish.
This whole fight was a great, badass, Western moment.
Now load that chest and go.
Now let go of that stud. Go on about your business.
When he dumps the spice out into the sand, the shot seems like it's straight out of Dune, the novel where a drug called spice is mined from the desert world.
You can see spice in the air.
Dune, of course, was a major influence on Star Wars, but you don't want to hear about all that. Let's get to the Jedi stuff. The episode's title is From the Desert Came a Stranger, and it has a couple of meanings. One stranger from the desert is Din Djarin, who just arrived from Tatooine, but mostly it refers to Cad Bane. But we'll get to him later. This episode was directed by Dave Filoni, who created Ahsoka Tano for the Clone Wars movie and is going to be spearheading the Ahsoka series. So this episode features the two genres that run deepest in Star Wars DNA. There is the classic Western and the samurai film, with Luke sharing Eastern teachings with his pupil Grogu. The planet is even filled with bamboo, which mostly grows in Asia. Luke training his students on a lush green world seems like a nod to his Jedi Academy in the Legends novels, which was originally built on Yavin 4, the rebel base from A New Hope. So this planet where Luke is building his Jedi school is called Elfrana. We saw it in the flashbacks in the sequel trilogy and also in the comic book The Rise of Kylo Ren. That comic details what happens after Ben fled the temple and shows his first steps in joining Snoke and the Knights of Ren. Now in that book we see that most of Luke's Padawans are very young or even children. And after Ben collapsed the hut on Luke, he didn't go on a murder spree. He just got out, looked at the temple and saw a red cloud forming, and then lightning struck the temple, killing everyone inside. So it's implied that it was actually Palpatine/Snoke who did the murdering. But later, after Ben falls in with the Knights of Ren, he does kill Luke's remaining students. Now up until now, this is all we knew about that Jedi Academy. Now we see that it was actually modeled after the first Jedi Temple on Act 2, which makes Luke's exile there even more heartbreaking. He retreated to a place that looks exactly like the site of his greatest failure. So this is the same temple, but notice in the Last Jedi flashback, we see several small huts built onto the temple, where the Padawans were probably quartered. After this point, Luke travels with Lord Santaka to find Force-sensitive children around the galaxy. Now I also like that we see this rock appear over a hill, a fake out to make us think that it's moving with the Force, because you know, that's what the Force is for.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
This is a moment that I have dreamed of seeing for years, the construction of Luke's Jedi Temple. And now, it's just sad because we know how it ends. But I'm going to complain about the sequel trilogy at the end of the video. When Din is landing on the planet, we see that his console matches what we saw in The Phantom Menace, except now the controls have gone from red to blue. Padme's Naboo cruiser also had red panels, so let's assume that this is the software that they used on Naboo and that Peli and Din just replaced it with this nice bluish-green software. R2's sensors are duplicated exactly how they appeared in the original trilogy. John Q on Twitter points out that when the camera moves past the Naboo starfighter, for a moment R2 is framed like he's in the cockpit, like he was in The Phantom Menace. And the channel-heavy spoilers observe that Din was forced to wait on Grogu, just like Yoda made Luke wait when he arrived on Dagobah, kind of like a parent waiting on his kid's report card at parent-teacher conference. Then we see Luke meditating with Grogu, still wearing his black suit from Return of the Jedi. Now, actually, I thought he would have changed it by now, because this suit was meant to symbolize that he might turn to the dark side in that movie. In A New Hope, he wears white, then Empire Strikes Back, he wears gray, and at the end of Jedi, after this,
I am a Jedi.
a flap comes loose to show he's wearing gray underneath. Man, Luke Skywalker looks way better than he did in Chapter 16 of The Mandalorian. Lucasfilm actually hired a deepfake artist who went viral for creating a more realistic version of deepfake Luke. There's still a little bit of uncanny valley there, like a vacancy in his eyes, but the emotional connection to Grogu was right there. Very well done. Man, this episode had everything from every era of Star Wars, even clone troopers, which, you know, this series is really ignoring an important part of Boba Fett's legacy. He was created from the same DNA as clone troopers. Millions of military fighters were around the galaxy for years wearing his face. Though I do have some questions about how this could have worked. I mean, he's bald, and some clone troopers are bald, but some of them also have hair. So I gotta think that this just comes down to negligence. Someone really should have told Boba Fett that the best way to prevent hair loss is to start when you still have hair left. And that is why I use Keeps, the sponsor of this video. There's actually a history of hair loss in my family, so when my hair started to thin, I didn't waste any time. So believe me, if your hair is starting to thin, don't put this off. Start using Keeps now. Treatments can take up to 4 to 6 months or more to see results, so it is important that you act fast, and you have to start early and stick with it. The sooner you start using Keeps, the more hair you will save. It's even proven to work on a clone scalp. Keeps has more 5-star reviews than any of its competitors, and hundreds of thousands of men trust Keeps for their hair loss prevention medication. So if you notice that you're losing your hair, do something about it. For a limited time, go to keeps.com/screencrush or click the link in the description to get 50% off your first order. Back to the Easter eggs. In his lesson, he tells Grogu about Yoda.
His name was Yoda. He was small like you.
And we hear Yoda's theme play. He repeats his line about size not mattering.
Size matters not.
But when Yoda said it, he was referring to the size of objects in relation to the power of the Force. But then he turned it around to mean his own physical size.
I said, seagulls, stop it now.
Sorry, wrong clip. This one.
Judge me by my size, do you?
Luke helps Grogu remember his final moments in the Jedi Temple. Remember, we learned in The Mandalorian that he had blocked out most of his memories.
Then his memory becomes dark.
What Did I Miss 6 on Twitter reminds us that Luke's mind meld
Remember.
is a lot like Captain Spock's at the end of Wrath of Khan.
Remember.
And this whole sequence was heart-wrenching, showing his little face in terror, reacting to the Jedi slaughter. One of many times I cried in this episode.
You cried?
Yeah, man. Did my tears surprise you? Strong men also cry. Strong men also cry. This slaughter is faithfully reproduced from Revenge of the Sith right down to the armor of the 501st Legion. And this trooper in the middle. You can tell by the scratches on the helmet that this is your mom. One person pointed out that this could be Sindralik, who was head of security at the temple, but we see Anakin cutting him down in this hologram. After the 3 Jedi fall in front of him, we don't get to see how Grogu is saved. And this is one of the big mysteries of Star Wars. One possibility is that he saved himself. The dark side within him was unleashed and he force choked the troopers. But that wouldn't explain how he got out of Coruscant and into the hands of the Klatooinians 30 years later. There is a great fan theory that Mace Windu actually saved Grogu. So think about it. We never see Mace's body. Palpatine weakens him with Force lightning and throws him out the window. But we have seen Jedi use the Force to break their fall many, many times. So maybe a weakened Mace Windu broke his fall. He decides he has to go to the temple to warn the Jedi, but it's too late. The 501st is already there. So he decides that he can't save everyone, but he can save the most innocent and promising little Jedi, Grogu. So he helps him get off world, and then maybe erases his memories so he won't continue to be traumatized. And somewhere in there, he's killed. And some people think he could have been saved by Jocasta Nu, the librarian.
Are you having a problem, Master Kenobi?
But in the comics we see that she did try to reform the Jedi Order, but there was no Grogu anywhere in sight. Or it could have been some other Clone Wars character we wouldn't expect, like Barriss Offee or Luminar Unduli. Years after the Purge, the Empire used Luminar's body to lure Jedi out of hiding. So she might have survived that initial purge at the temple. Sir Arthur Indeed on Twitter points out that the dream effect for Grogu's flashback was the same one that we saw for Anakin's premonitions in Revenge of the Sith. But let's move on to one of the best Star Wars characters of all time, Ahsoka Tano. Now, if you're not up on the Clone Wars and Rebels, here's a very brief refresher. Ahsoka was Anakin's Padawan who eventually became a very powerful Force user. She left the Jedi Order because she was certain it was corrupt, and this helped drive a wedge between Anakin and the Council that Palpatine later exploited.
They asked you to do something that made you feel dishonest, didn't they?
Ahsoka survived the Jedi Purge, went into hiding, and years later helped to found the rebellion. The last time we saw her, she was looking for a couple of characters from the show Rebels, the Jedi student Ezra Bridger and
Grand Admiral Thrawn.
Now when we meet her here, she says,
"I'm an old friend of the family."
I love this line so much. It's just like one of those fanfic things you just always wanted to see on screen. In Rebels, we do get to see Ahsoka confronting Vader and learning that he was actually Anakin Skywalker.
Ahsoka.
Anakin.
So knowing that years later she connects with Luke and they tell one another stories is so satisfying. She learns about his redemption and Luke learns about his mother and his father's fall. And Ahsoka calls him Master Skywalker, which, as a fan of the Expanded Universe novels, was just great to hear. It's also one way that he showed up as Old Man.
But we do not grant you the rank of Master.
What?
The optimism in this scene is heartbreaking.
There's nothing now, but will someday be a great school. Grogu will be its first student.
Actually established canon from Rise of Skywalker clearly establishes that Leia was Luke's first student. And then there's this line.
There is no place in the galaxy more safe than here with Luke.
Before Ahsoka leaves, Luke asks,
"Will I see you again?"
Perhaps an echo to Lil Annie's final words to his mother.
Will I ever see you again?
Thanks, Jamie Rivera on Twitter for that one. When Din decides to leave, we hear the same theme from when Grogu left in Chapter 16 of The Mandalorian. Except in The Mandalorian, the music is rising, a little more hopeful. And you know what? I cried. Cried real hard, like your dad does when he watches Rudy and he thinks no one's home.
I want Rudy to dress in my place.
And then, I was shocked to see that we got to see more of Grogu's training. Luke carries him around, like he carried Yoda during his own training. In fact, there are a lot of inverted moments here, where the student has become the master. Just the image of Luke teaching a baby Yoda is an inversion.
Sometimes the student guides the master.
He teaches Grogu new abilities like force jumping.
Bend down, jump, and as you do, feel the Force flow through you.
And I'm betting this force jump will be very useful later in The Mandalorian, when he needs to get out of danger when they retake Mandalore. It's also exactly how Yoda would jump when he would fight. You know, I always hated Yoda lightsaber fighting, but this episode kind of makes it okay for me. Maybe because it's explained as the Force like moving through him. Luke tells him,
"You're trying too hard. Don't try. Do."
An inversion of this.
All right, I'll give it a try.
No. Try not. Do.
And then Luke does flips just like in Empire. And he brings Grogu to the top of bamboo stalks, echoing one of the most beautiful moments of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, when Li Mu Bai brings another student into the treetops. He teaches Grogu a lesson of balance, similar to what he taught Rey.
The wide world exists in balance.
And between it all,
Balance.
And in this moment, they play a little bit of the Twin Sunset theme. He also has Grogu stand on one leg and concentrate just like Yoda made him do in Empire. And then he brings out the training remote that we saw in A New Hope, Attack of the Clones, and Rise of Skywalker. I love that Grogu wanted to use it as a ball. Then the droid shoots him, just like it shot Luke. It's also cool to see that Luke was a very promising teacher, but he was always plagued with doubt.
What should I do about him?
It shows that he's not the invincible Jedi Master, he's still human, uncertain, and flawed. Ahsoka tells him,
So much like your father.
because Anakin was also at a loss at how to train Ahsoka at first.
But I'm afraid I've actually been assigned to Master Skywalker.
What? No. There must be some mistake.
Then she gives him the advice,
Trust your instincts.
which is exactly what Qui-Gon told his father in his first Jedi lesson.
feel, don't think. Use your instincts.
But now let's talk about what you really care about, the war against the Pykes on Tatooine. Din lands in the palace hangar where we see some of Jabba's old skiffs and the
fire spray gunship.
After a briefing with the mods in Kursitan, he flies off to recruit the people of Freetown. On the way, he flies past a sandcrawler where the Jawas have salvaged the Krayt Dragon skull from Chapter 9. And oh man, speaking of Western tropes, as soon as this deputy opened his mouth, I thought, cannon fodder.
You want to park your starship, you gotta do it out there in the flats.
Now, the Weequay bartender is played by W. Earl Brown, who played the bartender named Dan Doherty in Deadwood, which also starred Timothy Olyphant.
That's some fucking way you have about you, Dan.
Now, you can either say your piece to me and Johnny, or you can get the out of here.
So it's awesome to see them reunited in another Western in space. Din tells him,
"Your town might be good for now, but it's all part of the same planet."
Which echoes the theme of The Phantom Menace. Obi-Wan tells Boss Nass,
"You and the Naboo form a symbiont circle."
That movie was all about showing how life forms need one another. The Naboo and the Gungans, and even the midichlorians needing us to survive.
Midichlorians are a microscopic life form that resides within all living cells.
Also, Teoki on Twitter pointed out that the bar has been decorated with the ribcage of the Krayt Dragon that the townspeople killed. That's a great detail. This woman is working on a swoop bike like we've seen in Star Wars Rebels. And then we get to the return of Cad Bane from the Clone Wars, and he's voiced by the same actor, Corey Burton. Cad Bane is the #1 bounty hunter in the Clone Wars era. His duster and hat are designed after Clyde Van Cleef's roles in Sergio Leone's spaghetti western films.
My boy, you become rich.
During the Clone Wars, he did all sorts of work for the Separatists, including kidnapping Force-sensitive babies. He did this so Darth Sidious could experiment on them, probably to withdraw their midichlorians so he could clone himself 50 years later, since apparently now everything was just leading to that.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Now, Cad Bane looks even cooler in live action. I love how they did this. The slow reveal of his face, the long pauses, and when we finally get to see him, he is perfect.
Tatooine belongs to the Syndicate. As long as the spice keeps running.
And this line again echoes Dune.
The spice must flow.
It's very cool that Bane is showing up in this show because one aborted storyline from the Clone Wars would have shown him mentoring a young Boba Fett. So I'm wondering if that's actually canon and we'll get to see hints of it in the next episode. The duel is filled with Western tropes, the way it's shot, the close-ups on the face, close-ups of the gun holster, and another Western trope, the dumb young deputy. Now, I do think the deputy talking saves Cobb Vanth's life. After he's shot, the people go to bandage Cobb, and he doesn't look dead to me. If anything, this is exactly what the people of Freetown needed to motivate them to join Boba Fett's war against the Pykes. When he falls, one of the people says, Star Wars Pills on Twitter points out that a stem is a health bar in the game Fallen Order. And then the Pykes return to the bar owned by Jennifer Beals. Lots of recurring Easter eggs in this place. We see a Rodian, a Bith, R3X from the Star Tours ride, a protocol droid with a body like C-3PO's, a Twi'lek who's wearing a gold bikini that looks a lot like Leia's slave outfit. This species is a Chadra fan, and next to it is a Snivian. Greg Wilderman on Twitter pointed out that this Snivian is modeled after a rare Kenner action figure from the Mos Eisley Cantina. But you know who you don't see in the bar? Max Rebo. I can only assume that it was his day off and he survives yet another crime-related disaster on Tatooine. This show needs to end with Max Rebo on Jabba's throne, hopping and bopping all to himself. So when the Pykes arrive, they get the same offer as Boba Fett and Fennec Shand.
Can we take your helmets for a cleaning?
Yeah, me.
And then the Canto that we thought was a bribe turns out to be a bomb. In the concept art, we actually see this going off inside the bar, but I'm betting this turned out to be too violent for Disney+. Now, let's talk about the ending and Grogu's choice. Luke presents Grogu with two objects that will decide his future. This is reminiscent of Lone Wolf and Cub, where the Ronin warrior presents a child with a ball or a sword. Will he choose an ordinary life or the way of the warrior? Like many of us predicted, Din did have a chainmail mithril-like vest made for Grogu out of Beskar to protect him. And when Luke offers it, we hear a small part of the Force theme. Then he also presents him with Yoda's lightsaber. Now Zaps on Twitter pointed out that we see this lightsaber destroyed in Darth Vader issue 1. But in the Age of Rebellion Trials of Dagobah comic, we see Yoda rebuild his saber. So it could have been among his personal effects which Luke would have recovered. But it does show that Luke had a strong connection to Yoda. He's repeating all of his teachings and acting like training Grogu is a way of training a new Yoda. Last week we speculated about what kind of path Luke would teach for his new Jedi Order. Would he insist on the prequel era rule of detachment or find a new path that allowed for emotional attachment? Well, now we have the answer. He believes that Grogu cannot be of the Force when he has such strong feelings for Din. And this makes sense because now Ahsoka has taught Luke that it was attachment that caused his father to fall. So, above all else, he wants to avoid his father's mistakes. You know, my final thought about all of this is the episode was great, but it made me really sad about the sequel trilogy. I mean, we never got to see this moment on screen. Luke is a Jedi Master. Luke teaching students. Instead, The Force Awakens was a remake of New Hope, where Luke was already in exile and the Jedi Order had been destroyed. I really wish these new movies would have taken the time to show us something new like these TV shows are doing. But what do you think? What's Grogu's choice going to be? Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.